Welcome to Khayal Unfiltered, a space for honest and candid conversations. In our first episode, I spoke with students about their school years, and they talked about pressure, about teachers that they still remember, and about how school shaped them. It was an honest, introspective conversation, and it brought some very uncomfortable truths to the surface. So I decided that it's time to shift the lens, and today we're doing exactly that. So I'm joined today by Aisha Mir Ahmed, Faraz Yousfi, and Akib Ali, three incredible teachers who've spent many years in the education system, long enough to see students change and systems evolve. Together, we'll talk about what teaching really looks like from the inside, the expectations you begin with, the compromises you make, and what stays with you long after. Thank you all for being here and for agreeing to be part of this conversation. So let's begin. Please introduce yourselves and tell us the year that you began teaching and what brought you into the classroom. Shall we start with you, Aisha?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Um, as Aisha said, I'm Aisha Amir Ahmed. I've been a teacher formally since 1999. And unlike a lot of people in the Lahori education circuit, I think I've always taught at just the one school. Um, and I've grown through various roles. My nickname in the staff room used to be Stepney because anywhere there was a gap in the teaching force, I would be plugged in until it could be filled because I have a lot of interests and I enjoy a lot of different fields. So I haven't taught the sciences or maths, but other than that, I've taught pretty much every subject that's taught at the school at some point or the other. Most of the time I teach geography or English. And other than that, at this point, I'm now an O-level vice principal as well. I got into teaching because I realized very early that I really love it when I explain something to someone and they get it. Even now, I've had students at some point ask, hey, why do you keep doing this? Because for a lot of students, it's very hard to imagine that teaching is something one would want to do. And so I've always told them that because for all the things in teaching that can be drudgery, when I see a student's eyes light up because a new thought has occurred to them because of something I've said, then that makes a whole week or even a month of work worthwhile. And that continues to be the case. The place where I feel most alive is in a classroom where a good discussion is happening.
Yeah. Me too. Ji Faraz.
Gee, so my route is a little bit different, unfortunately, but honestly, I kind of backed into teaching in 2006. I had moved back from the States and I was trying to find gainful employment. And in the meanwhile, with my chemical engineering degree, I kept finding roadblocks because I didn't have the right Safarish, I think. And so in the time waiting, I decided if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something in academia. So I decided, let's find out if I can go teach somewhere. So I started at a small school and then eventually found myself liking it quite a bit. And I think Aisha hit it to the point. When you're teaching a class and you see that light bulb click on, there is like, I think, no feeling. I think that's our Superman feeling. That's the only Superman feeling we get, but that's that Superman feeling that it kind of takes us to start thinking about all of the other pressures and all of the admin pressures, and we can ignore it all and be like, listen, what we're doing actually matters. And I think that's why I've been able to stick for it, I guess now 20 years. And I know not as quite as not as quite as Aisha, but I mean, we've seen so many things in it. Every child, every generation, when you connect with it and when they start appreciating what you're teaching, and even though, because I teach chemistry, so it's not always the most profound happiness when kids see me and they're like, oh my God, this guy's going to try to teach us chemistry. But when they get it, and even if it's a child who's getting like a B or getting a C, but they're coming from somewhere where they had no clue, and you see things start clicking, and you see them writing things that they're like, wait a minute, this makes sense. That feeling is why I've stuck with it. I guess not the career maybe of choice when I was younger, but it's the career that I felt I was meant for.
Akib?
Hi, my name is Akib Ali. I've been teaching since 2011, and I always knew I will be teaching because I did a degree in literature, and there aren't a lot of options for a literature graduate. Although my initial plan was to do CSS, and that was the reason I convinced my parents to let me study literature, but I didn't pursue it. Um, yes, and I've been teaching for like a lot of years, and yeah, literature brought me into the classroom because there was nothing much else that I could have done with literature. So I always knew that I was going to be a teacher. Yes.
Yeah, me too, me too. So I also started in 1999. In fact, मेरा जो official first day was 1st of April 1999. So yeah. And yeah, that's so Aisha, you and I think we've got what, 25, 26, over 26 years, right?
Yikes.
It's a lifetime. It's a
Mhm.
lifetime. So even I think I also always knew I was going to be a teacher because when I was choti si thi, so I used to make, come back from school, have my doll sit in front of the cupboard and I'd have a chalk in my hand और chalk से cupboard के ऊपर मैं assignments लिखती थी और मेरी students were my dolls. So tell me, when you think back to your first year of teaching, what feeling comes up first?
I was just in seventh heaven.
Yeah.
I was teaching geography and literature, and I was the young new teacher who'd come back from college in the US. And so the students were excited to see me. And I still say that middle school is the best stage group to teach because you have to get them to like you. But once you get them to like you, they're yours for life. So and they're still not too cool to be excited by ideas, and so they're very willing to express it when something seems cool to them. And so it was just a lot of fun. I mean, I had so much fun that first year. I know when I came back from college, my parents were very worried. My father in particular, he was an engineer and a poet. But in his mind, real problems were scientific and technical problems. Other problems are not really the challenging problems of the world, which I think is hilarious if you look at the world right now.
Yeah.
But he was concerned that I would find it too easy and boring after a while, that it would be too much of the same and monotonous. And so he was very relieved, and my mother was very relieved to see that I basically came home on a high every day.
How wonderful, Aisha. And funny you mentioned middle school. For me, जो मेरा experience थोड़ा बहुत रहा है, I feel middle school is the most neglected, I think, in our system. सबसे
Very
ज़्यादा
challenging भी होते हैं ना. Their hormones are going all over the
yeah,
place. You have half the kids who have started thinking in abstract ways, and half the kids who still are very much stuck in you need concrete things before they're going to understand. So it's nuts.
Yeah.
But that's also what makes it so much fun. I think a lot of teachers, though, especially if you've come up in a very traditional way of learning, it's very difficult for them to deal with this craziness which is inherent to the age.
G, Faraz, what did you
Jay,
Ah.
I think fun is the right word. I was having a lot of fun. I'll be honest. That's probably, I wasn't getting paid much, so it was definitely not the pay.
Same.
It was like, I know I wasn't getting paid much, but the reason to keep going back was, she's right. I started in middle school as well. And I was asked to do a lot of science and maths here and there. And then whatever, like, whatever the school wanted, like in that regard, for that little while, I was like Aisha, I was also a Stepney. Like I remember one day they told me to go in and teach English, and I was like, "Oh my God,
Mm.
you want to destroy the kids' English? What are you thinking?" And they're just like, "You have an accent, go in there, teach English." And so, but it was fun. It was fun because you do get to connect with the kids, and it's you realize that this is where their mind in middle school is where it's starting to grow. And you can see ideas popping up. I remember we did a science fair thing, and I remember not coming up with anything. Like I know that they had given us 5, 10 projects, yeah, make the kids do these. And I was like, let's wait a day, let them come up with something. And they came up with things that were way better than what the school had ordained. Like, this will look good, put this up. So because they were busy trying to get, things to look a certain way. And the kids came up, and you get to see how they think. You get to see, where those minds, where those hormones are taking them, where those ideas are taking them. And
Mm.
you hope that you can shape it to be a good thinker and a good person. And so I felt fun. I also felt a little bit of a burden because I started to realize a little bit into the second to third year after a little while that, everything you do is going to have some kind of effect. Aisha is absolutely right. Those kids are yours for life.
Mm.
And that you get older, they see you places, they get older, they meet you the same way. And I noted, and I can relate to this because I just recently met Aisha's daughter, and she was my student, and she still met me like I was teaching her class. And so you can see that they still have that genuine connection. And, they may, whatever they may have thought about the subject, but that feeling, that kind of camaraderie, that kind of connection, I think you can't get in most other professions.
Absolutely. But you're a fabulous teacher for us. So there you go. You
Thank
have to
you.
be, and like you all said, you have to enjoy what you do. And students catch
You
on very
do.
fast. I remember conducting this
Yes.
research
Very quickly.
very, very quickly. So एक रिसर्च मैंने की थी फॉर अ स्कूल एंड उसमें मैंने बच्चों से क्वेश्चनेयर्स भेजे थे एंड एवरीथिंग एंड सो देयर वाज वन यंग लिटिल चाइल्ड आई थिंक क्लास 4 का होगा और 4 होगा आई थिंक हु रोट एंड आई थिंक इट वाज अ ही और अ शी व्हाटएवर द चाइल्ड रोट आई विश माय टीचर एंजॉयड व्हाट शी taught.
Oh, that's sad.
या सो
That
आई
is.
मीन there's so many मतलब ये जब आप रिसर्च करें और बच्चों से पूछें ना तो आई मीन there's so much comes up and unfortunately we are not really talking to children enough I think so
I agree.
yeah
I
sorry
agree. I find that even as an administrator, um, the conversations I have when a student comes into my office on her own
hmm.
are the best. You
Hmm.
learn so much, and so many places where
Yeah,
things can be improved.
absolutely. Ji Akib.
My experience was a bit different. I started teaching right after I graduated undergrad, and I taught at a university. It was a public university, so I was a bit scared that how it's going to be. And I studied literature, and I had to teach language, academic writing, and then I was also teaching all boys intermediate section. That was very scary, teaching those teenage boys.
Hmm.
Um, and what I learned from that was like teaching is a separate thing, classroom management and having relations with students was a separate thing.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the first year was scary, but after that I got used to it.
Okay, so tell me, what did you think teaching would be like before you began, and what surprised you the most once you were inside the system, like right in the beginning?
Yes, I thought teaching would be about what I've learned at university and what big ideas I'm going to teach, et cetera, et cetera. But after that, I realized that it it is not always about that. Like as I said, classroom management is a big thing. Like you need to know how to capture your audience and ऊपर से मेरा subject भी ऐसा है English or literature where you have to really sell what you are teaching. Like if it's a hardcore subject like chemistry or other than maths, students could be थोड़ा डरे हुए होते हैं and then they pay attention. Students are not really willing to learn, like so many of them. So that was a bit of a surprise. There isn't much motivation in most of the students, like, so that was a real challenge in trying to motivate and attract those students to study. Yes.
And would you say that is gender specific? I mean, would you say it's more common in boys or girls, or it's both? The lack of motivation.
Well, I've taught for so many years now. So I've taught at private universities. So I've seen like mostly like rich people's kids, like, so it's not gender specific, it's everyone. So like I've seen like many privileged background people not really caring about their studies and yes, not really caring for the teachers. So I don't think it's gender specific.
So, actually, I had done teaching. I did TA in a university. So I thought honestly, and then I had an amazing teacher actually in high school. One that, this is the thing that kind of made me want to come into the profession. Because if I can remember his name even now, I think that speaks wonders about the kind of teacher he was. And so I imitated him. I thought that was teaching. Like I knew how he'd done my class and how he taught us and how he'd kept the discussion, but at the same time he'd bring it back because he knew he had a curriculum to teach as well. But I mean, I imitated him to be very honest. That was my vision of this is what a teacher's supposed to be. This is how a teacher's because his dedication. And I remember like we're not supposed to take names, but I mean, I still remember him, and he, God rest his soul, he's no longer in, with us. But just that was my idea of what teaching is. I imitated him literally in the classroom, and then when I kept moving from different schools, and particularly one trained me quite a bit. So it was a school that had a very firm curriculum, kind of you had to follow a very firm curriculum. So what it did is it took the freelancing in me and it kind of merged hopefully at this point the ability to take the freelance and the order and kind of meld into one. But that's what I did. Like my idea of teaching was him, and I do agree with Akib. What it was sitting in a classroom and finding that one child in the corner, or that those three or four children who are not participating. And for me, that was like, if we're all talking, why are you there? And then that was something that I had to really learn how to kind of manage. Okay, how do I get those kids in the back who think, this guy's just here wasting our time? How do I get them involved? That was one of the things that was most surprising to me. Okay, you think you're trying to help everybody, and you think everybody wants your help, and you learn that there's other circumstances that perhaps prevent that from happening. But so you're surprised why aren't these children listening? I'm teaching. Why aren't they listening to me? But that was the thing that I had to adjust to the most.
Okay. Yep. Aisha?
What's interesting to me is that one of the things that surprised me early on continues to, I'm still puzzled by it, which is how much time you spend on teaching learning habits and methods as opposed to content. Because I think as a learner, I was never that way. I realized that I've only really learned metacognitive strategies once I became a teacher. I was always more of an instinctive learner myself. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, and I think it speaks a little bit to what Akib and Faraz are saying as well, but it saddens me still how many students are just focused on exam preparation. That they're in. So you have the ones who are disaffected or disengaged. Those are that one kind of challenge. But then you have the ones who are super engaged, but don't want to do anything that doesn't directly speak to an exam assessment requirement. And those are the ones that really make me sad, because the disengaged ones, like I was saying, you have to find what sparks them. But these guys, they're motivated. They're super motivated, but they're just so motivated by something that I think is not the purpose of education. I mean, they're always shocked when I say that tests are only how we figure out if you learned what you're supposed to. They're not the point of your education. And I remember my first couple of years in geography in particular, I would tell students that they weren't allowed to, we weren't going to talk about the exam. until 2 weeks before the end of term. And they weren't allowed to ask me any questions about the exam. They had to do the work. They had to do the tasks that we were working on. And for them, that was just, it was revolutionary. And then 2 weeks before, I'd give them a really clear, so for some of them, I think it did become clear what I meant. But I had that luxury. That's one of the other reasons why middle school is great, because you don't have an O level to prepare for, or a metric exam to prepare for, or an A level to prepare. You're preparing the internal course. And so there's a lot more freedom in that. And you don't have this whole pile of past papers that students are thinking, but the mark scheme for this variant says this. And
Yes.
so for
No,
me,
I think
that's the ongoing challenge.
sorry, I was cutting Aisha's point, but I think what she said is exactly correct. I remember taking a class out into the futsal court, and I have a habit of doing a sodium reaction with water because it's quite entertaining for the students. And this is the one time that they get to see the boom and the bam, and they get to get that connection. And I remember we took our class out and we took larger samples of sodium and we put them into a larger tub of water, and we saw the explosions occurring. And I informed the school ahead of time, don't send security out. It's not gunfire. It's just me, popping sodium. And so I remember one child walked up to me and said, "But sir, this is only like a 2 or 3 mark question on the paper. Why are we spending so much time on it?" And I was like, "Man, this child is going to live through life missing out on experiences because they're thinking about the 2 marks that they have to get for this question on, like, it's a recurringly 2 mark question." And so he or she wasn't wrong about that. It bothered me that that's what they were thinking of that point. It's not, not the wonder of the phenomenon that they were seeing in front of them and like why this is happening. So that's a little bit surprising still, yes.
Yeah, I think, okay, what surprised me is going to come later because there's another question, jiske andar I'll talk about that later. But coming back to our teaching, tell me how much of who you are in the classroom comes from formal training? How much of it is from instinct, your personality, or your experience? What do you think? I mean, when I started teaching, I know I came straight out of the master's program and into teaching, right? So there was no formal training as such, except that I had done a master's in English literature. So I started teaching literature to ONA level students, but there was no training. And it was much later. I feel for myself, I feel I was more instinctive, kind of connected or understood things faster. And it was by instinct, I felt, how I was interacting with the students. And of course, and also very logical. So I'm very organized, and so logically मैं पढ़ा रही थी ये पढ़ाना ऐसे करना. And also looking back, was also imitating really good teacher that I had in college. How she taught Macbeth is how I wanted to teach, and I was comparing it to an awful teacher at school. So मेरे सामने दो examples थे. A really not very kind teacher, very unkind teacher, and then a really good teacher. So I would think back and say, नहीं मुझे वो नहीं बनना, मुझे ये बनना है. So that's how I taught. So there was no training as such. It was later that I decided कि भाई नहीं मुझे कुछ और. I need to know. I need to find ways of teaching these children. Or like जैसे आप सब कह रहे हैं, reaching that child who's not as motivated or etc. What do I do? What do I do? So I was at a loss. Nobody taught me anything. It was by trial and error, and then eventually doing a degree in education that जिससे मुझे थोड़ी बहुत समझ आनी शुरू हो गई. Aisha, you're in the admin as well, and you've been a teacher. So
so my experience is a little bit different than most teachers that I know, in that I came into teaching with a teaching degree.
okay.
So for me, I've spent more of my life as a teacher than not at this point.
Yeah.
The thing was that when I started out, I had a really good set of routines and suggestions that were coming from the teaching program. And in some ways I could be too rigid about those because I felt like, no, this is the proper way to do things. And I mean, so the head of my department in college was the kind of professor who came into class with a syllabus that was pre-punched. Every handout that she gave us already had the holes punched in it. And so you knew, and she would have in her listing that on this date, the class session that is regularly scheduled will not happen because you are going to be doing this alternate activity on that date instead. The first day of class, we were supposed to have walked into class having read 70 pages of an educational philosophy book already. So she was super organized, and to me that was like Faraz was saying, like this is what a teacher should be like. Over time, I had to learn that it doesn't always, not everything you learn in teaching school works in the specific classroom that you're in. And so I had to loosen up some. And then over the years, I had to learn that, oh, things have evolved and I need to go back and look at methods again. And so that's been interesting too, because I mean, cognitive science has changed so much in the last 20 years. And I mean, I think the speed of change keeps growing, frankly. We're learning so much more about the human brain. And so there are specific learning techniques that people had not talked about. My son jokes about how much I talk about spaced repetition now. And I mean, these are ideas that were not specifically named or given, or the idea of interleaving or all of those things. And so you learn them and then you teach them to students. And again, so I'm finding that that's where students' eyes are lighting up now, where you give them a hack for how to learn better or how to learn more efficiently. And that gets everyone excited. The ones who don't want to be studying, the ones who want to make sure they get the A star, all of them are excited about that.
So you technically had some kind of formal training before you began teaching, in the sense you had a teaching degree. So
Yeah.
what about you, Faraz and Akib? I know, but I mean, I've said I didn't have any training or teacher training that I was, that I had got.
No, same, no, as such official proper training. Actually, I was having a discussion with my sister. She's in the States and she's a teacher, and she had to get the accreditation that they require there to be able to teach. And she was telling me, like, you didn't have to do this because, she saw my career when I started. She's like, I don't remember you doing any of this, and you were able to get through. And I said, obviously, things are different here. It was very strange for me as well when I was able to walk in and teach, and they just let me walk into a class without any kind of training. Again, after I went from my first school to my second school, however, that school made me do some training. I don't know, I won't call it like formal training like Aisha had, like it wasn't something that I had to get a degree for, but they made me shadow a teacher for 3 months.
Okay.
And basically I was shadowing the lady who I was going to be replacing, because she was she was resigning for health reasons or whatever. And then so they had me shadow her, and I would go into the class as a second teacher. I would stand in the back while she would teach, and I would try to see the viewpoint. I actually walked around, and she gave me a lot of freedom, to her credit. She could have said, sit in that back corner over there. So she wanted me to see every vantage point. Like she was one of those teachers. She's like, sit in the back and see how I'm doing it. Sit somewhere towards the front and the side and see how I'm doing it. And look at how, I keep an eye on the kids, how at the same time, I try to interact with all of them, how I try to maintain discipline. So that helped me a lot. And yeah, it was a very good experience. I mean, it made my life obviously a lot easier, because we were basically walking into classes of 42, 43 middle school kids. And I don't think if I hadn't had that 3 months, I don't think it would have been as easy as it became later on. And so they had a very structured curriculum, and that helped a lot too, because it kind of reined me in. I was a little bit freelancing too much, and it reined me in that I've got to do something as well, but then at the same time do the other things that I idealistically visioned teaching to be.
Okay. And
Yes, Aisha, like you, I also started teaching after my master's in literature. I did have some trainings later on, like IB training and some other trainings as well, but it's mostly like instinctive, or I had my mentor. She was my teacher, also my colleague. So I would often go to her and discuss things with her, and she would guide me. But it's more like instinctive and reactionary, and I
Mm.
did have some trainings later on, and I realized that I was doing somewhat similar to what the training was saying, and it's always hard. It's not always like easy to implement what you have, like Faraz said, like what you have studied right there in the classroom, because it's all very spontaneous and not like different all the time. You tell me, Aisha, you did the whole degree, so do you think like you are a different teacher now after doing your degree in education?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, um, I feel that I know that you need to be really good at what you're teaching. You need to know your content really well, right? Then you have to have a certain level of empathy. You have to have a certain level of, that it's not certain, you need to connect with your students. And that's my next question, actually. What do you think? How do you think students have changed? But coming back to you, Akib, so I feel जब मैंने एजुकेशन में डिग्री की उसके बाद मुझे बहुत सारी चीज़ें समझ आई, लाइक एजुकेशनल फिलोसफीज समझ आई, करिकुलम क्या होता है, कैसे डेवलप करते हैं, पेडागोजी क्या होती है, टीचिंग strategies, etc., etc. Abhi bhi, there's a lot that I feel like I don't know. And when I went to England, that was so I did 2 MPhils in education. जो मैंने यहाँ से किया वो basically I got to understand pedagogy क्या होती है, philosophies क्या हैं, curriculum, different types of curriculums, different types of philosophies, what is professional development, etc., etc. When I went to England, there was a lot of focus on student voice, pupil voice, asking the right questions to get the right response. So, thinking things through, that even if you want to extract a certain kind of information, आपको एक तरह से question पूछना है. So, वहाँ थोड़ा सा कुछ और broaden हुआ. But yes, I feel that बहुत सारी चीज़ें मुझे समझ आई, and I also saw that हमारे schools की जो administration है, कितनी चीज़ें मेरे ख्याल में they could improve on so many things, that they're not even thinking along certain lines. So, for example, for me, like I'll just give you a small example. I was there was this whole big class, and professor gave us some cases to study, and we were studying, and then he came to our group and he said, "So, what do you think?" And ye wo. So everybody was talking, and I said, "Oh, I find this extremely useful." So he said, "Okay, can you please back the extremely that you've just used, the word extremely?" I was like, I just think it's really helpful." So he said, "No, you used extremely helpful. Now I need data to back that, because I really don't care what you think." Nobody cares what you think. So, and that's something I brought back, and I was like, my God, हम इतनी सारी changes करते हैं स्कूल में, curriculum change हो रहा है, ये change हो रहा है, वो change हो रहा है, ये कर लो suddenly, वो कर लो suddenly. Where's the data to back any of that? Nothing. So, so yeah, so मेरी इस तरह से understanding बहुत, and they were very big on research, get your data, sit down, then decide, and then make the changes.
सोच के काम करना, एक तो I think it's just not a habit we have as a society. We believe in plans as being something that you put on paper to satisfy some requirement. Again, it's like the exam, right? That you're doing things to fulfill an exam requirement.
Yeah,
You're not thinking about, can a plan actually be useful? I mean, I find that when I'm talking to teachers, where they're just like a lesson plan banate hain, and when I ask them a question, it's like, but wait, you say you want to do this, what's going to be happening in your classroom to make that happen? And then you can see, for the teachers, the light bulb go on, oh, I can actually think through what's going to happen in my class before I step into the classroom, and that'll help me do it better. That's something most teachers don't. So curriculum ke liye, we make all these huge systemic changes, and we want results now.
Yeah.
And education, of course, is, that just doesn't happen. What you do in preschool, you don't actually know the value of it until you're out in the world. And that's 18 years later. So, but the wo cheezein jo hain, we're not willing to wait.
Ji, Faraz, you were saying something?
I was just going to say that I think what you said about the admin, I think we're reactionary. I think that's simply it. I mean, look at the way in the last 3 or 4 years we've handled the fog and I mean, I remember we had school in December, we would open in January, and I don't recall such a reactionary, I understand the fog is there, it's a dangerous, people can't be on the road, but like every year it's coming. And why are you not planned and prepared for it? Why is it that we always get caught like right now, the fact that they ended the week to go one more week forward. Like there's no way that a government didn't know that it was going to be cold in January. It was going to be cold in January. It's always cold in January. So why is it that we're now making? So I think that's the problem. And this is the way that the decision making is done by the admin. Like I know you and I can attest what was very hard for me was the without data changes that we made for the distinction
Oh
metric, if
my
you
God.
recall.
Yes.
I like there was no data, and there was and I remember all those meetings being the bad guy saying, "But you have no criteria," and then they would tell me, just stop saying that, and I was like, "Why? Give me the criteria." So we can start pressing that button. Like if I'd known what the criteria was, I'd be pressing it every year because
Hmm.
it is financially better for your job and it does make the school, and obviously some kid gets to walk around with a certificate, but it takes away what is learning. It really does.
When I joined Faraz, and that's something that is, I mean, I loved the school, the environment. So, because when I joined, the focus was, ek to we had fantastic faculty and all of that, and really good student body. School had asked me to come in, and she said, "Listen, your goal is that if there's a child who's getting a C, first determine kya levels hai. If a child is getting a C, you must bring that child up to a B. Just up it." And by the time I left, I mean, and the reason why I left was because of, well, some personal reasons, but apart from that, I decided I'm not going to teach anymore. Is when it became all about how many A stars, how many distinctions, separate the high achievers, give extra to the high achiever, this, that. Yeah. So that was kind of like I was struggling with that because I did not, my core was, I didn't believe in any of that. I felt equality
Man,
chahiye.
just to cut you a little bit, sorry I'm interrupting you, but that was one of the things that I had. One of the biggest arguments I had. Do the kids who are not high achievers, do they not pay you a fee?
Yeah.
Like my understanding was if they're all paying, they have the right to have their child educated, whether he gets a B as his best or whether he gets an A star as his best.
Absolutely, because I've been through it with a teacher who sort of ridiculed me in front of the entire class. And then I got a teacher who just gave me a tuition ली थी, and he read an essay that I wrote and said, "This is how you write, character. This is, I like the way she's described this XYZ." And had I not got that teacher, I would have had no confidence in myself, truly. And then it was actually at the college level when I found really good teachers who had it in them to sort of understand where each child is coming from. At least the subjects I took and the teachers I got
Mhm.
understood me. And so that is, so come and which leads me to my next question, that over the last 20 years, what do you think has changed most about students? I know that मेरे students जो हैं, for example, they were a lot more respectful. They were a lot more keen to learn. So मेरे जो शुरू के batches थे, which and I still meet those children today, they were very different. They wanted to learn. There was this element of fun. There was this, naughty, just fun, innocent. Towards the end of my career, like I mean, teaching time at school, that was 24 years later. I noticed that a lot of the students would enter, no salam, nothing. I sure you remember, हम लोग खड़े हो जाते थे teachers के लिए. No salam, passing you corridor, missing, sometimes even knocking you, and not like, all of that. And you'd be like, my God, what is going on? As I told you earlier, I had this conversation with some of my two of my former students, and two obviously students nonetheless, two. And the words that they used for their school ka time was anxiety ridden, fear, stress, dehumanizing, toxic. A few of them felt nostalgic or they loved their school, but all of these words came up. And these are children who are now in their 30s. So I'm just wondering, what is your experience? I've noticed a change in these 25 years. Aisha, what do you, since you and I have the, हम सबसे पुराने हैं यहाँ पे, oldies, old fogies हैं हम.
Dekho, I think so. There are changes that are cultural.
Hmm.
I mean, I remember honestly when I started teaching, being really taken aback when a student greeted me with "Hi, Miss,"
Mm.
And I was just like, what is this? You don't
Yeah.
just say, I mean,
Yeah.
hi is something you say to your peers, maybe. You certainly don't greet a teacher that way. And I mean, that I've loosened up about that because that's the culture has changed in that regard.
Mm.
And this I'm talking about literally my first year as a teacher, I was shocked because I could not have imagined greeting any of my teachers with hi instead of
Yeah.
assalamualaikum
Yeah.
or good morning, well, one or the other, a
Mm.
formal greeting nevertheless. So some of it I think is just natural, like social norms change. One of the things I think that is most different about students now is I think they're more fragile, genuinely fragile.
Mm.
And I don't mean this in the like I'm not criticizing them. This
Yeah.
is just
Yeah.
one of the things where I think they have a lot more emotional stressors
Mm.
than we had. So the sheer number of emotional stressors and the level of omnipresence of those stressors.
Absolutely.
So the fact that they have these handheld computers that are in their bedrooms
Mm.
means that a bad day at school never ends.
Mm.
Or, I mean, whatever is happening 24 hours. So they're sleeping a lot less. Their sleep cycles are a lot less, their lives are a lot less structured than
Oh,
ours
yeah.
were.
Absolutely.
I find कि मतलब सुबह उठना है, स्कूल जाना है, स्कूल के लिए टाइम से तैयार होना है. Like just the number, and I noticed this as an administrator, just the number of kids who are coming to school late every day has
Mm.
grown.
Mm.
And parents don't seem to think that it's a problem. I can't imagine from 15 years ago a parent thinking that a kid staying home unless they were sick was okay, or unless there was some major, like there's some real reason why they can't come to school. And
Mm.
now you have like 30 kids in a batch
Mm.
whose attendance is like 75% or less.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they're missing a quarter of classes. How are they going to learn? And that logical link has broken. Some
Yeah.
of this is post-COVID, where
Mm.
we really, something fundamental broke, I think, during the lockdown,
Mm.
especially since we, and this is true globally, we have not acknowledged the learning losses that happened. We've assumed that kids are just going to start right back up. So if they did class 6 online, they're still supposed to do in class 7 what kids 5 years ago were doing in class 7. And the
Mm.
fact is, they can't.
Mm.
And every year, because obviously, I mean, I teach O levels, and so I'm seeing how the difference in the learning loss.
Mm.
So what kids lost if they were in grade 10 when the lockdown happened, what kids lost when they were in grade 5. So our current class is, I mean, students who are now in around age 16 or so,
Mm.
because they would have been entering middle school when the lockdown happened. A lot of them struggle with extended writing because those are the years in which you switch from doing short answers to longer ones.
Mm.
It's really interesting to me also. I mean, I like research. And so to me, noticing these things is really fascinating, but it's also really depressing because hum logon ne, as a world, we've decided to pretend that this didn't happen.
Mm.
And we're expecting that learning didn't have to change, that we didn't have to do any remediation, that requirements, I mean, you know, the Cambridge exam board says, well, we've returned to pre-COVID thresholds and assessment has gone back to, and you're like, well, how has it gone back to normal when the kids have not been able to learn the same things?
Mm.
And so, and they're feeling the pressure of that. And of course they're feeling the pressure. So what they're expected to do is things that they have not been prepared to do. Then, I mean, I think the academic pressures on them are considerable in terms of performance pressure.
Yeah.
Just because, and I think this is particularly true in Pakistan with our population explosion,
Mm.
that the number of opportunities available after school have not grown at the same rate as the population has. And so, as I was saying before we started this, I mean, in high school, I had 3 A's, 2 B's, and 2 C's, right? I got into every college I applied to. Now, that's unthinkable today. That just would not happen.
Yeah.
You would struggle to get into most local colleges with that record. And so while I worry about the emphasis on A stars, I also understand it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's counterproductive, but unless we're willing to change something at a systemic level, that's going to continue. So these kids are heading into, I mean, we weren't so worried. We were worried a little bit more about nuclear war than these kids are, but we didn't think the world was going to end in a climate catastrophe. We didn't think that after like 1990, we didn't think that the Third World War was going to break out. We didn't watch genocide live on TV. You know, I mean, these are things that they're just seeing, and the post-truth thing, where appearance has become so much more. You'll have a conversation with students, and you'll see how worried they are about how they are presenting themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And these are worries that at some level you have as an adolescent, no matter what time you go back to. But for them, all of this, it's like it's on steroids. And so I think, I have to be much more careful in how I talk to my students now. I can't make sarcastic jokes anymore. I used to be able to do that with the academically stronger students. I could make a joke at their expense and not have it damage them. I can't do that now because there's a real danger of doing real damage. And this is not about, kids are so oversensitive. That is not, they are genuinely, it does them emotional harm because they are in this hyper state of awareness about how they are perceived.
Yeah.
So if I'm making fun of them, that must mean that I don't think highly of them. And so that hurts them very deeply in a way that pehle, my students would say, we know if you give us a hard time, that means that you expect more from us. And so that understanding has changed.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've gone on.
No, you're absolutely right. You brought some very, very important points. You've highlighted very important points. In a nutshell, I feel बच्चे achieve अब बहुत कुछ कर रहे हैं. Yes, they have all these high standards. They're achieving. They're probably doing much better than we did academically. But I think children today are unhappier than children have ever been.
I would agree with that.
Ji Faraz, what do you think?
I was going to say, I think that, you're right about all of the things you mentioned, the fact that the salams in the morning, the greeting in the morning. Like I remember even when I started, there was a huge difference. Like not even getting the class to stand up, but the idea that they acknowledged that a teacher had entered the room. And now you walk in and it's like, you feel like you have to let go of certain things. Now I'm pretty strict myself. I have a habit of just a reputation of when I walk in, it's got to be that way. But even I've had to let loose these requirements because, I mean, it's just you walk in and the kids are just not responsive. And I think what Aisha said, I think one of the biggest problems is why, they've let these norms go and why they don't think these norms are important anymore is because I think they're growing up with, like she said, they have so many people in their ear because of that device that they hold in their, arms even when they're sleeping. You're getting social advice from people who may not be, trained enough to give you that advice. You're getting educational advice from people who should not be giving you educational advice. You're getting health advice from people who are medical advice from, people who are not trained doctors or should not be giving any, is one of the biggest things is, those everybody is trying to do this diet, that diet. And you look at half the people who are selling those diets, they're not even doctors, they're not even nutritionists, they're not even anybody trained in the background. They're just selling something that they got a hold of. So you can't expect a child to be just in the classroom when they turn on the TV and they see nothing but, and everything but justice. Like you're watching kids who are watching these murder cases here, where if you're poor and you get killed, the person who killed you gets to walk away scot-free. And it's like I don't want to be preachy about it, but they don't, like Aisha said, they're putting on the TV and they're watching a country ferment a genocide and nobody having the courage to get up and say, what is this? You can't kill people, in mass numbers because of you wanting their land. Like they're watching this. So the kids are going to start to think, well, this is okay. And so if that's okay, then you can't expect them in the classroom to be like, you know what, I need to respect this guy. That's not okay that I'm disrespectful. And one of the biggest problems that we deal with is the parents have started to back off. I think I can't fathom, to Aisha's point, getting up in the morning, remembering when I was in school and telling my dad or my mom that I'm not going today because today's like a wasted day. Like I can't even imagine saying that to my mom and my dad. And I had a mother that showed up, like her son wouldn't come on Fridays. So I took out the attendance and I was like, we have a class on Friday and he's never here. And, obviously I'm teaching, so he's missing it. No, well, yours is the only class. And then he has this and this and this. So he says, I have 4 free lessons. And so it's a waste of my time. I was like, which lessons are free? And so, I'm a little bit anal retentive in those kinds of things. I went and got her the English teacher. I went and got the math teacher. I was like, can you please tell her that you've not given a free lesson on Friday ever? So I can get her to understand that when, like I used to tell some parents, maybe
Yeah,
you
but
need to
Akib and
start
I
doing what
know
our
that
parents
English
did.
is an optional lesson, right?
No, I mean,
It doesn't matter
they
if
think
you show
so.
up for history or English.
Yeah.
I, I think for them it wouldn't matter if they showed up for chemistry or biology either, because I think it's just that they have so many strings pulling at them. There's YouTube teachers, there
Mhm.
are YouTube health expert help, and then AI coming in and giving them the ability to write notes. Like I remember, yes, last year, a child printed out these AI notes that he was using for preparation, and they were all wrong, and
Mhm.
everything in them was chemically things that I would not, like I was telling him, you would not get credit for this. And so you've got wrong people giving advice. And I think then it's very hard for us to expect that, they're going to be these perfect kids. I remember before it was very filtered. Your parents gave you advice, and then you could trust that advice and you could enact that advice. And it does matter also. I think Akib's mentioned this a little bit earlier. It matters whether the kid wants it or not. Like he's mentioned, those that are a little bit wealthier tend not to want it as much. And then now, like I go to 2 branches of a particular school. One branch is located in a slightly, better part of the city. Another one is located in a slightly middle class tier part of the city. The desire for that middle class tier, those children, like they have to maintain their scholarship.
Mhm.
And so they want it more. And you can tell that they show up to work. And then when I go to the other one, they know it doesn't matter whether they have a scholarship or not. They could care less. And so it's very hard to find them that motivation to be like, you know what, get your grades up, or you can, if your potential is here, this is not where you should be. So I think that's
Which
the issue.
I'm sorry. So one of the things that I think it's important that we talk about, though, is that not everything has changed for the worse.
Mhm.
Okay. So, I mean, yes, we had much more filtered information, but that meant that for kids whose parents were bad sources of information, they were in a really tight spot, right? So in some ways, there is a freedom to be a different person. They have so many more ways to be who they are than we ever had. So that's really important, I think, to acknowledge that where you have all the pseudo experts, you also have real experts that they have access to, or real communities that have the same niche interests that they do, that they're able to. So kids who like doing graphic design, or if they want to do 3D computer design, so Pakistan mein baith ke people do not have the resources necessarily to teach them, but right now they can get connected with someone somewhere else, and they're learning those things in real time.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's important. Or someone who, doesn't fit the achi bachi ka mold, right? And I think this is particularly important for girls, where because the freedom of movement in Pakistan for girls is so much less. And so access to the outside world via the internet is an immensely empowering thing as well. And so their expectations of what they should be permitted and what someone should be allowed to inflict upon them, that's changed. And that's for the better.
I'll just be quick. First, the expectation that why are students not like the way when we were students is, I feel like, very unreasonable to expect someone. I'm sure if we'd ask our parents, they'd say like, and our times, our students used to be like this. You guys are so spoiled. So I feel like it is never the same. And
Yeah.
Aisha, what you were saying about the respect and saying salam and standing up, I think most of it that was out of dehshat, not out of respect. Like most of the students would do it because वो दिल से नहीं करते थे, because our teachers were really like strict or
Mm.
um and I feel like we as teachers have been kinder, we have been cooler. तो वो आगे से जो बच्चा भी है वो जो दहशत अगर निकल गई है टीचर में से, तो बच्चा इज ऑल्सो, आई एम श्योर अगर अब भी हम उस लेवल की दहशत फैलाएंगे तो स्टूडेंट्स खड़ा भी होगा, सलाम भी करेगा, पैर भी हाथ लगाएगा, सारा कुछ करेगा. तो आई फील लाइक इट्स अगेन रिएक्शनरी बिकॉज वी हैव बिकम कूलर एज टीचर्स. सो दे फील लाइक ओके वी डोंट नीड टू लाइक लिक देयर बूट्स बिकॉज डंडे नहीं पड़ेंगे. बिकॉज हमें, चलो हमारी जनरेशन को डंडे नहीं पड़ते थे, बट डर था बहुत ज्यादा. अगर पेरेंट्स की जनरेशन पे चले जाएंगे उनको डंडे पड़ते थे तो दे वर मोर ओबीडियंट.
Mhm.
So I feel like, that is also the case, and I agree with Aisha about being fragile, and the COVID thing is very important. I feel like COVID has changed us a lot. I would just give an example of this famous BBC interview, बड़ा formal interview चल रहा है, पीछे से बच्चे भागते आते हैं, दो बच्चे भागते आते हैं, and I feel like what it has done is that वो जो एक फसाड है ऑफ फॉर्मेलिटी ऑफ बीइंग स्ट्रिक्ट ऑफ रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस, वो सारा जो है वो खत्म हो गया है. दैट फसाड ऑफ बीइंग, वी हैव सीन लाइफ एट इट्स वर्स्ट, लाइक वी वर लाइक सर्वाइवल मोड पे थे एंड वी डोंट रियली केयर अबाउट एनीथिंग. वो जो फालतू की चीजें थी तो वो बच्चों के माइंड में भी हैं कि ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स आर फ्रिवलस, दे डोंट रियली मैटर. To expect them to care about life and things pre-COVID, I feel like again is being unreasonable because they've gone through that, and being kids, I'm sure they were more sensitive to it. So, and I feel like आज का बच्चा is not just reliant on teacher. उनके पास knowledge बहुत ज़्यादा है, AI है, internet है, they have so many people guiding them. Then for us teachers to expect them to worship us like पुराने साल के, I feel like it is wrong. And ये teacher के लिए बहुत unhealthy है. हम बैठ के कहीं वो हमें worship नहीं कर रहे, हम तो teacher हैं, हम teachers को अपने worship करते थे. Why aren't they worshiping us? So I think it's very unhealthy for the teacher to have that kind of expectation. We need to kind of realize this and give up on being the kind of guru and we know it all. I feel like मेरे बच्चे को बहुत ज़्यादा पता होता है. Sometimes they tell me more about the new things that are happening. And if you don't give them that room, that you're gonna just end up complaining and yes.
Well, I mean, I feel that I have received a lot of love from my students, a lot, a lot. You know, it's like a tree that keeps giving. Literally, that's how I see it, that I've received much more. But I'll disagree with you here in the sense that it's not about wanting the students to worship you. That's not the point here, or to be petrified of you. And nobody wants that. And you're absolutely right. We are way cooler, than our teachers that way. But I feel that, children are doing well, Aisha, great. There is societies bhi hain, clubs bhi hain, बच्चे दूसरे schools के बच्चों को मिल रहे हैं. There's a lot of exposure, there's a lot that is going right for them. But at the same time, जहाँ मुझे लगता है schools गलत कर रहे हैं, वो ये है कि सोसाइटी एक क्लब है, बच्चा सीख रहा है. जैसे आप, I spoke about the debating society, and where a student told me कि I felt like I was turned into like a marketing tool and dehumanized. And so I feel that's where schools are. I just think this is all very wrong, to take the joy out of learning and turn it into a you have to win or this will happen. So
Oh,
that's
absolutely. I think there are real structural problems with,
Yeah.
and so it's not
And
the
one more
whole-
thing.
I actually think we need a revolution in
Yeah,
the
I think so
education
too.
system. I think
And
the whole
and
structure is wrong.
I also feel that with the parents, like Faraz is saying, making you बच्चे miss करे जा रहे हैं school या whatever, they're taking so much of that experience from their child in the sense they're saying it's okay. So to me, that translates as disrespect for your school, for your teacher who's coming prepared and who's actually there to help you. So I mean, but you're right, Akib. ऐसा नहीं है कि we want our children to be scared of us. I know I've been there and I've been scared at school, particularly in school, like really scared, and of not achieving, और fail हो जाऊंगी, ये हो जाएगा, वो हो जाएगा, वो I feel सब गलत है. But एक inherent respect अपनी learning की तो होनी चाहिए, and somebody who's teaching you, and I feel yeah, we have to also be the kind of teachers who command that respect, not because of
Yeah.
fear but because we are honest with what we do.
Yes, I just add two things. Aisha, what you're saying is in regards to private schools or where we are just dancing to capitalism, जो वो
Hmm.
कर रहा है, तो the schools are doing whatever capitalistic forces are telling them to do. And secondly, I agree with Asha, we need a revolution in the education sector because अभी हम वही पुराने methods को लेकर चल रहे हैं. I think we need post-COVID with the AI, and we need a drastic kind of change in our approach.
We need to give space to every child on the basis of what they excel at.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest problem. The subject selections from middle school to O levels are some of the worst, enacted applications that I've ever seen in my life, because you're not at all trying to see what the student is excited about or what the student wants to do. I think what it is, and we're all as parents. Unfortunately, I have that same philosophy. Mine just started O levels, and the thing that I sat down with me and my wife were, well, he should take sciences and O levels, and then in A levels he can take whatever he wants. And so the problem is that there are things changing. There's so many things that kids are excelling at that we're not privy to, because we've always thought of the pre-COVID notions of this is what education ought to be. I think we need to open up the vocal things and the vocational things and let them do, like if someone excels, like she said, at graphic design, there need to be courses offered that to make them better at what they excel at. I think and it's only going to happen when we get away from this complete reactionary reference. Because Akib's right, the school's going to do that which draws as many admissions as it possibly can. If that means having a concert every week, they're going to have a concert every week.
Yeah.
And on the system and the need for basically a rethinking and redoing of the whole education system. So look, the fact is that you have in the world an increasingly capitalist view of education and formal education in particular. But in Pakistan in particular, we were talking about how reactionary our decisions are, and तो हम बहुत ad hoc तरीके से काम करते हैं and बहुत ही दकियानूसी तरीके से काम करते हैं, frankly. So we have for kids who are trying to do their O and A levels, they have to go with to get this equivalence. So the thing that Faraz was saying, right? Schools can't offer a greater variety in what subjects students take, because if they don't take these 3 subjects, then for the rest of their life, they are barred from entering an engineering university in Pakistan. And I'm not going to talk about medical colleges, because for there, the subject choice seems much clearer that requirement makes sense. But with engineering in particular, the options for what you could study that would prepare you adequately for being different kinds of engineer are so much wider. And we're just not willing to accept that as an education system, right? And the fact that kids have to decide at the end of 8th grade, I mean, think about what your brain was like when you were in 8th grade. None of us are in a position to make up our minds about that. And parents then tend to be like, nahi, bacche ne medical hi karna hai, medical engineering, maybe law, yeah, IT. ये चार चार फील्ड्स हैं जो ढंग की हैं और वरना बिजनेस स्ट्रीम कर लें कि आगे एमबीए करेंगे. So the view of what education is so limited. And no, I mean, I have a meeting as an administrator with parents every year about what it means to choose subjects at the O level and why you would want to make sure that you study a humanities and a social science, that no matter what your interests are, you should have at least one science, at least one social science, at least one humanities subject, because they all teach you your brain different ways of thinking, and all of those are important, and that you can't possibly know right now which one is going to be the one that's the best stream for you. So, but those are things that our larger system is not designed to accommodate. And so when we as a school ask students to do these things, we're basically saying, well, you have to do your 3 sciences plus these things. And so that adds to their examination burden in a way that's not really fair, right? They shouldn't have to do everything and everything else. But the system doesn't allow for a real education unless you happen to be one of those people who's known since you were a kid that you want to be a doctor. Right? And I think we don't talk about vocation at all in our education system. Taaleem or sehat, these are 2 fields in which no one should go if they don't have a desire to be there, right? Like you should be a teacher if being a teacher is where your home is. You should be a doctor if being a doctor is where your home is. And I mean your internal core home. And if it's not, then go do something else. There's lots of ways to make a living in the world. Go pick one of those wonderful ways in which you can be someone who contributes to society. But if you don't, if in these fields, if it's not your home, then you don't do your job right. It actually impacts your ability to do the job in a really fundamental way.
Yeah,
you can be an engineer. You can be an engineer even if you don't love engineering.
Yeah.
It's not going to. I mean, if you're able to do the math, then the structure that you put together will hold. And it doesn't. And you don't have to have loved doing the math while you did it.
Yeah.
But you can't say the same in medicine. You can't say the same in teaching. If you don't love doing it, then your ability to convey information is hampered. If you don't love doing it, then your ability to diagnose is hampered. And this is really important. But our education system makes no allowance for this. I used to be a debater. मैं debating करती थी, and honestly, I spent more time doing debates than any student should have time for. I mean, but I learned so much because we weren't debating for competition. Like that wasn't why we were doing it. Yes, competition was the arena in which we did this fun activity, but it was because we loved being on the floor and arguing with each other. That's what it was. It wasn't about ki trophy mili ke nahi mili. And it wasn't about the competitions. Sorry, I mean, we have this argument with students every year. Okay, we can't be sending students to so many different competitions.
Yeah.
But the whole capitalist force कि मिस मगर अगर हम नहीं जाएंगे तो वो लोग हमारे इवेंट में नहीं आएंगे और फिर हमारा इवेंट में फेल हो जाएगा. And so you have kids missing like a Friday. Like every Friday for a term, they're just not in school. It's ridiculous, right?
It is.
Because जो teachers Friday, every teacher is just like मेरी Friday को class ना रखना. क्योंकि जो बच्चे involved in extracurriculars में वो कभी होंगे ही नहीं. So there's something fundamentally broken about the way we're structuring things, and we're not talking about it formally. These are things that we say in this kind of conversation. Or we'll have a conversation, a private conversation in a school administrator's office, but it's not something we're discussing. And schools, because they're competing against each other, are not willing to come together to solve this because their fundamental goal is not the well-being of students. The vast majority of schools are not functioning with student well-being as their primary goal.
Absolutely. So, with that, as a continuation of that, Aisha, what is the biggest gap between what schools claim to prepare students for and what life actually demands of them? So we can just quickly sort of all four of us can kind of.
I'll let someone else take that.
Yes. For us, and anything that you कोई gap नजर आता है हम जो पढ़ा रहे हैं और फिर life eventually.
I think simply life right now demands survival. And I think what we're teaching them is we're teaching them to fly while life is demanding that they just be able to stay afloat. And I think what the most kids it also matters like what background you come from, but I think kids like I had a very interesting conversation with a student who was the way he weighed in on the subjects and the classes that he took, and he talked to me about how it was all about a judgment of return on investment. I found it very amusing because I wanted to like ask him how much he had invested actually in his education. I was like, didn't your parents invest in this education? And so he thought I was being smart alecky with him. But I mean, my question was simply, but when you think of education that way, you're never going to get what you deem return on investment because education makes, like Aisha said, it's the long game. It makes you who you are in the long term. And so I think the biggest problem, the biggest disconnect is we're still trying to teach them that long, holistic person, but they're more interested in how can I monetize this and how can I survive? Because it's getting more and more difficult year by year I mean, I just look at our country, like buying a car is now something you have to really and properly think and put, like it has to be a family decision. You can't just walk in and like, walk out with the car anymore. You have to think about it. I was joking with my wife, forget cars, like getting a mobile phone, a cell phone is a decision you have to make. How much are you willing to spend? So they're looking at things because they want their life to be like all of the things that they see online and they see on TV. And so for that, like if you need the iPhone, you got to start thinking, like, the iPhone costs 4.5 lakh rupees. So how do I monetize myself to where I can get that and I can keep going out to eat and I can have a nice car to drive? And so I think we're not giving them that connection. And I've actually got a kid in O levels in O1 who has started an AI business. And what I'm simply citing this example because it makes all of the other kids think like, obviously in my class, they're going to think, look at this guy teaching us chemistry while one of our classmates is walking around with 25, 30,000 rupees in his pocket because of the side business that he, is already conducting. So we're becoming less important as such in the sense of the education. For us, education was important. For them, it's just 8 hours that they spend before they can actually start finding ways to, I guess, really earn what they feel
I think
is
for a
the
lot
right
of
value
kids
for
and
their
a lot of
lives.
parents, for a lot of kids and a lot of parents, sending their kid to a good school is simply about having the name of that school on their resume. That's
And the
it.
grades, Aisha, and the grades कि ये school है ये they're promising
नहीं ग्रेड्स तो वो
admissions
वैसे
and
भी ले
grades.
लेंगे ग्रेड्स तो वो ट्यूशन जाके पढ़ के और ग्रेड्स भी ले सकते हैं because the
Okay.
Cambridge exam system is broken as well.
Yes.
So it is possible to go
I
take a crash
yeah,
course for a
I
month
agree with
and
Aisha. Like I think I'll be honest, like I
You're
don't know how
right.
many of you, but there are certain institutions where I know that the kids are not going in the morning for the grades. They're doing everything in the evening for the
Yes.
grades. They're going in the morning because of that name and that jacket that they're going to wear for the rest of their lives, and it's going to stand out everywhere that they go.
Yeah. I feel that, हम लोग what we are not preparing our students for, हम लोग grades तो दिलवा रहे हैं, admissions भी हो रही हैं, वो सारा कुछ हो रहा है बच्चों का. But are we building, the schools building any level of empathy in the children? Are we teaching our girls how to manage their money, for example, how to manage wealth management सिखा रहे हैं? Are we teaching them how to regulate their emotions? Are we teaching them how to deal with your own body, like nourishing your body? What does that mean? How to nutrition के ऊपर हम basic problem solving सिखा रहे हैं? हम रेगुलेट करना
देखो
इमोशंस को नहीं सिखा रहे, ये तो मुझे पता है।
नहीं, मगर मगर बात ये है ना कि again we go back to the structural problems where if you're teaching in a private school or if you're administering a private school, then obviously at some level you are subject to the desires of parents.
Yes, yes.
My experience as an administrator and a teacher is that anytime I want to include things like this in the curriculum, it gets treated like a free period, or so parents think that this is useless. My school runs a critical thinking class. I mean, we're talking about problem solving. We run a critical thinking class. Every teacher who runs it gets to choose what they want to teach in it themselves. So they will negotiate with students about what topics they want to consider. And so that can be used for any number of things. In some years, it's been a film club. In some years, it's been like feminist theory. And it varies depending on who's teaching it and which students are in it. But parents invariably think that class is useless. Students, when in the moment, are not going to say it's useful. 5 years later, they come back and say, oh, that was one of the best classes I had in my entire school career. So there's a level of, yes, I mean, students are focused on immediate return, but we have to recognize, and this is where I feel like, I mean, having formal education as an educator, I do think, I mean, I'm a professional who has a better sense of what is required in the long run than the student does today. I may not know everything, and there are lots of things that students teach us. Absolutely. Right? But I have perspective that they lack. I have perspective that parents lack. But my experience is that neither students nor parents are willing to respect that expertise. मतलब कोई भी किसी डॉक्टर के दफ्तर में जाके उनसे ये नहीं कहता कि आप जो इस मर्ज की ये दवा दे रहे हैं ये गलत है. हम ये नहीं कहते. We trust that a doctor has been to college to study, to be an expert in this. And so that when they tell us कि अगर आपको ये वाला कैंसर है तो ये वाली दवा मिलनी है, तो there is a level of acceptance of their expertise. But we don't get that as teachers. Part of this has to do with, well, there isn't formal education. There isn't formal accreditation. So you don't get to say, well, I have a degree that has trained me to make these decisions. But the fact is, all around the world, teachers, even the ones who are accredited, are facing this problem. Because people feel like because they've been through school, they are experts on schooling.
But do you think that has something to do with, जिस तरह मैंने कुछ classes observe की हुई है, grade 1 to 8 भी observe किया हुआ है. I feel teachers वो classroom में जाते हैं and they start teaching. And none of the teachers actually, जो मैंने at least observe किया है, वो they'll put the learning objectives on the board in certain schools, but they won't discuss them. We don't discuss why we are teaching them something and what उससे उनको फायदा क्या होगा, what are they learning. So maybe if you're designing these programs, like for example, if I want to design something on how to regulate your emotions, maybe if I said, if I tell them what it's going to do for them, perhaps there'll be more takers, or parents may not respond the way they
I've
do.
become much more cynical about that. I can't get parents to come to a meeting.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
right? So how am I going to tell parents about it when they're not going to show up to talk to me? Right?
Yeah.
How do I persuade parents of the usefulness of something if they are not willing to enter into the conversation?
Correct. Yeah, that's a point.
I honestly, and my feelings about this have changed a lot over the last 4 or 5 years, I would say.
Yeah,
I've become much more cynical about this.
Teacher meeting, this section had like 13 students and only one parent turned up. And I was shocked. And this is like A levels. And I was shocked, like none of their parents are interested or concerned, or they want to discuss something with the teacher.
On the flip side, I conducted this research in a school which is a not-for-profit school, जिसमें लोग donations देते हैं. And it's a Anyway, so when I went there, I mean, when I was talking to the principal, I saw two things. One, the teachers were there was a lot of collaboration between teachers, which I had not seen in these private schools. A lot
Mhm.
of good, kind of collaboration. Second, they said that the parents who were actually fruit vendors or cleaners or whatever, उनके बच्चे आ रहे थे, वो ये कह रहे थे कि हर जब हमने ये नया प्रोग्राम शुरू किया, IB स्कूल था वो है, एंड सो दे सेड कि पेरेंट्स वुड कम एंड से कि ये हमारे बच्चे काम क्यों नहीं घर लेके आ रहे, हम वी आर गिविंग, जो पैसे ले रहे थे उनसे 500 600 1200 1300 वट एवर द फी वॉज. So, so they said we started educating the parents and they came every single Saturday to come and understand what their children were doing. So perhaps it's a like जैसे आपने पहले कहा था, ये the different levels of society जहाँ पे आपको
This
पता
is a
है
class thing.
yeah, it's a class thing. So I mean, and I mean, I was just amazed to see the level of work that they were doing and the kind of, the teachers on ki jo what they were bringing to the classroom was, I had not seen that in a private school. Tell me, how do you balance authority with vulnerability in the classroom without losing one or the other? I'll just give you a small example. I remember when I started teaching, this is one of the things that surprised me. It was my second or third year of teaching, and one of so I gave the students the admin didn't know, but I gave them that to evaluate my teaching. Basically, it's a workshop that I had attended. School में ही हमने attend की थी, and I thought this was really good. I need to know what my students think of me and as a teacher, or what I'm teaching, how I'm teaching, etc. So I gave them a questionnaire, and I got it back. And one student had written that, I wish you would be more yourself with us, that there is a barrier and you're just teaching and making sure that हमें ये चीजें आती हों, लेकिन आप we don't there is that we don't see you, and I wish we'd have more of that. I don't know if that makes sense, but that sort of got, and to date मैं मुझे अभी तक ये याद है, और मैंने सोचा इसके बारे में, and I thought नहीं, I need to of course have that barrier. एक होना तो चाहिए, एक होना चाहिए, एक divide between a teacher and a student. Just like I tell my own children, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent first, and then I'm always there for you, whatever. But so with the students also, I feel the same way. That मैं adult हूँ, वो line cross नहीं होनी चाहिए, लेकिन at the same time we have to also be human and we have to also give of ourselves without that line being crossed. I don't know. Does this make sense to you? How do you balance this vulnerability? How do you balance being yourself and
I think what it is that you've got to give them credit for being, and I think Aisha said this once, nobody thinks that they're intelligent. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that they have, that their opinion doesn't matter. So you've got to give them that credit. Like I'll give you a very basic kind of understanding. I was going through a little bit of an issue at home. My father was not well. And I think what happened was that I discussed it in class because a couple of them asked. And what happens is we're trained from the school to not take any of those discussions, to table those and just kind of move on and quickly get to your lesson plan. But I think just mentioning what I felt at that time and what I, thought about, yes, it may not, it may decrease that built up of idea of everybody, like senior kids telling junior kids, oh, Sarfraz is like this, so you need to be like that. I think it might have kind of moved them off of that a little bit. But what it did was it just makes them realize that you are a living, breathing person, and then you're doing the best that you can. And I think again, sincerity is always going to be the key. I've always felt that the kids will respect you if they know that you're sincere.
yeah.
If for even a brief moment somewhere in their 2 years with you or 1 year with you or 3 years with you, they feel that you don't care or you're not sincere, that you've got to take like I tell the kids, this is not your result, it's my result. And so, I think sincerity matters. And if they can't believe that, then they don't give you the effort that they ought to. I think this is the only way I've been able to do it. It's getting harder and harder. I agree with you. It's getting harder because the schools are now coming down with rules. Don't discuss this, don't discuss that. Kids want to discuss things with you. They want to discuss with you, things that they're seeing that perhaps, in a chemistry class may not have space, but maybe in another class would, but they want to discuss those things with you. And this is where we are told to, back up and not have any opinions. I understand you don't want to get political, but I think if they see your sincerity and the fact that you're trying to listen to what they're saying and trying to respect what they're saying, I think they have a greater tendency to maybe listen and respect what you're saying.
Akib, what do you think? I mean, you're a younger, much.
Yes, I agree with Faraz that we have to be humans, I feel like, if we act like teachers, I think at least the students of this generation, they are not gonna um, take you seriously or respect you in that way. And I feel like as teaching a subject like literature, it's not a one-way subject where I'm coming and explaining the fundamentals of physics or chemistry. Like it has to have it has to be like a discussion and of topics that could be very sensitive. So I feel like as literature teacher, I have to bring out my human side and be vulnerable and and a lot of times though boundary cross ho jati hai because I remember I was teaching at the school and we were having some discussion and the girls they were like not screaming but they were very emotional because we were talking about something sensitive and then the admin walked in like what is happening like something must be something inappropriate must be happening. I was like, oh no, it's okay, we are fine. You can just like walk out. Um, but yeah, but it's tricky. Like maybe not every teacher can handle it, especially if a subject is different. But I believe in this being vulnerable and not being authoritative because I feel like in subject like literature, being authoritative would not really work.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I learned that, so right in the beginning of my career, मैं थी थोड़ी सी कि बस एक gap होना चाहिए और respect करें और all of that. And then towards the end of my career, I was teaching texts like Akib, you I must remember, The White Tiger, and I was teaching a mixed group, and I'm like, oh my God. But and then students would ask me, it's like a story thi, or it was about postpartum depression. It was a class of with boys and girls, and so one girl asked me, "Aapko hui thi after you gave birth?" And I was like, for a minute, I was like, then I just said what I mean. I said, "Yeah, hui thi,
Yeah.
hua tha aise." And so yeah, there has to be a balance. जिंदगी में हर चीज में balance होना बहुत जरूरी है.
Actually, I found that I've loosened up a lot about it's not that it'll take over the class, but I'm willing for a lot more of my personal stuff to slip in occasionally. So a joke about something that my little one said, or a joke about something that my elder child has said, and it humanizes things because they have younger siblings who are the same age, or they are the same age as my son, elder son. And so wo connection ek ban jati hai. My favorite, and this is something I've always been willing to do, is that I walk into class and say, look, I have not had enough sleep, or I am extremely exhausted. This is not a day to mess with me. So please just be aware of that. And let's just have a class where we do things without any and because I'm going to come down very hard today. I'm not going to have a lot of patience. And so they appreciate that heads up tremendously in my experience, and they respect it, and they'll accommodate it then. So if you can show them that you have a need for accommodation as a human being sometimes, that's useful. If I've made a mistake, I always make a big deal about it. Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. And let's come back to this. Let's fix this. And thank you for pointing it out, right? So making a really big deal about how helping someone fix something that they've done wrong is really important. So those kinds of things, and not being too caught up in, oh my God, I'm the teacher, I'm supposed to know, and if I've made a mistake, oh my God, that's so horrible.
Yeah.
It isn't. We're human. Mistakes happen, but we have to fix them.
Absolutely.
So turning those things into teachable moments is my and I find that आपने एक जुमला कह दिया about something that happened in your family. Like I remember when I started out as a teacher, someone asked me if I knew Urdu because I'd come back from the US, and so I was talking with a much more American accent. And they assumed कि मुझे उर्दू आती ही नहीं है. And so I was just like, मेरे अम्मा अब्बा मुझे कत्ल कर दे अगर मैं उनसे कहूँ कि मुझे उर्दू नहीं आती. तो उस दिन फिर मैंने ज्योग्राफिया की पूरी क्लास उर्दू में पढ़ाई थी. And so it was a lot of fun also, but you have to it is a balance. You do it I mean, you can't let it take over, but they have to know, and you have to show up as one of you was saying, talking about sincerity. And
Faraz was saying.
like kids are really great at spotting fakeness.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you show up with who you genuinely are, and some people are just kind of distant. They're not really easy and free, but students will accept that if that's just who they are.
Hmm.
Uh, but it can't be कि आपने इस चीज का एक खोल अपने ऊपर चढ़ा लिया है and expect कि students aren't going to see through it. They'll see through it.
Yeah. I think it's like what you all said, being human and being sincere. It boils down to this. So tell me just in yes or no, or a little bit of explanation, how much freedom do you actually have in interpreting, implementing, and where do you feel
I've
most
been
constrained? Yeah.
I've been very, very lucky to so when I started out as a teacher, I threw out the textbooks for my geography class. I said, मैं textbook के बगैर पढ़ाऊंगी. And the principal let me do it. So I've been very fortunate. As I said, I've only ever taught at one school. And the reason that I've stayed there is because in 26 years, maybe twice I've been told for an idea, well, we can't really do that right now.
Okay.
Most of the time it'll be like, okay, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
So I've had a lot of flexibility as a teacher. I had less when I was teaching A level because you have less
Yeah.
time and there's a lot more examination constraint. So those constraints are there, obviously, जो एक external assessment की constraints हैं, वो तो आपके ऊपर हैं. But other than that, I've been really fortunate that I've worked in a school for my entire career where we try interesting things because we do want students to learn and be connected with the world. And हाँ ठीक है अच्छे result आने चाहिए, but that's not the be all and the end all.
Yes, we follow a prescribed syllabus, so there isn't much room for freedom. So you just have to follow what is. But I've heard of schools like where they even tell you what text to teach and what text not to teach. I've also taught IB, so there I had a lot of freedom, and from that particular school, I had no issues. Like they didn't never tell me what to do and what not to do.
Faraz.
Yeah, I'd say I have pretty much the ability to teach. My curriculum is the way I see fit. Yes, they want to have some kind of overlying guidelines, but like, oh, there's three of us that teach chemistry, and none of us teach it the same way. Like the way that we formulate our lesson, the way we go about doing it. No, like as a head of department, like when they made me this thing, and I was like, I can't be that guy. And so they tell me, you don't have to be that guy. Just tell them, in O1 we want this, and O1, O2 we want this. So there are some things that kind of restrict you, but freedom is there. We let them teach the way they see fit.
Yeah. I think we have O level, A level में फिर because I had a lot of freedom when I was teaching, a lot of which is why I enjoyed what I did. जो किताब पढ़ानी है अपनी मर्जी etc etc. I feel जहाँ पे इतना ज़्यादा freedom नहीं होता is I think grade 1 to 8 because वो most schools that's what I've seen जहाँ जहाँ मैं गई हूँ वो उनको एक set curriculum दे देते हैं और उनको उसी तरह से पढ़ाना होता है. I think so. I don't know your experience.
My experience is the opposite.
Okay.
That in grade 1 through 8, the teachers at my school have a lot more freedom than they do because the place where the restrictions are coming from is the external assessment.
Right.
It goes against the grain of the school to put that kind of restriction on teachers.
What is the one thing young teachers need to unlearn as quickly as possible? And another
my
question.
experience today,
Yeah.
They want more of them want to be their students' buddies. And they need to learn very quickly that being friendly and being their friend are two different things. And that it is very important to be friendly, but that they are not their students' friends.
Faraz?
I'm going to say with what I'm experiencing, the ability to monetize teaching as quickly as possible. I think that needs to go away. I think they need to take it as a teacher. Like, I think all of them are like, I've seen young kids come in and they're like, give us A levels like right now. And I feel like they're not prepared. And then you see it like really, in some cases it's okay, but in a lot of the cases it ends up really, really bad because kids are lost and kids are strayed. And then, just what you need to understand is you got to be a teacher first. And then I think maybe the money will come itself. They think it's about the money first.
I feel like teachers need to learn. They are not know it all kind of a person. Like now, students also have access to a lot of knowledge, and so they just get off their high horse and don't teach it like I know everything and you know nothing, and just listen to me.
And looking back on your career, what actually endures?
The light bulb,
Like
the
what?
light bulb in students' eyes.
Hmm.
That's the thing that's been honestly, that's been my touchstone for
Hmm.
my entire career.
Yeah.
I agree. Same thing. When a kid gets it and you've helped them to get it in any way possible, that's that feeling. That still endures.
I would say, we should try and make every child feel like they matter. Their voice is important, they are important, their learning is important, their failures are, it's everything is, it's okay to fail. It's okay to, to not put that pressure on them, to look at them as individuals. I think that is something that we should sort of hold on to. And I've seen as a evaluator as well, I feel that a lot of teachers are there just because बच्चों के साथ चले गए, बच्चों के साथ वापस आ गए. And some teachers teach at the O&A levels because they want to make that money, like you're saying, Fraz, that becomes their driving force. What endures? Huh? So, yeah, I feel that, yeah, at bottom of, at the end of it all, I think every single child should feel like they matter. And Akib, you're right that, हम वो जो पहले rigid वो थे ना idea of teacher and student and उस्ताद उसके साथ, वो obviously सारा बदल गया है. But at the same time, I do feel कि एक certain level of respect हमें भी करना चाहिए students को, और students को भी करना चाहिए अपने teachers को. So that it's vice versa. I think this has been a really interesting conversation. I feel that there's a lot more that we could have discussed, but given the time constraints, I also feel
Non-ending conversation.
non-ending conversation. That's right. That's so. Supposing अगर grades कल को सब गायब हो जाए, there's no need for a grade. What do you think would happen? What would change?
It would be a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Going to school would be a lot more fun.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would ever leave school. That's the only problem. I don't think we'd have like the professions and the children going into the field, because I can't imagine wanting to leave school if grades weren't there. Because then you're learning and you're experiencing life with your peers. What could be more fun than that?
On the flip side, students might not take their learning seriously. That's something that one of my students at the university said कि अगर grades ना हो तो शायद हम क्लास में भी ना आए, या शायद हम वो
They even
assignments
come
ना
to
वैसे
school.
करें. हाँ.
अगर
Would they
मगर
even
अगर
come to
शुरू
school?
से grades ना हो तो ये नहीं होगा. I think you can't take a kid who's come up through the high school system right now and put them in an ungraded environment and expect them not to be like, hey, woohoo, freedom. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But because obviously, I mean, you haven't nurtured them in that way.
Correct.
But no kid is born not wanting to learn. Everyone wants to learn. Every human being wants to learn. Every creature wants to learn. So we very carefully kill that desire, and we have to stop doing it. And I think grades are one of the big ways in which we kill that desire.
Yeah. And one last thing, I feel that, I feel कि जैसे teachers को ना, we don't look at teaching as a profession जिसके अंदर आपकी growth है. Most teachers don't actually. They don't look at it as a profession कि अच्छा मुझे अब इसमें ये सीखना चाहिए, इधर जाना चाहिए, इधर जाना चाहिए. They come to school, they'll teach and they'll leave and they'll get their paycheck and आगे. मैंने पूछा था एक बार
Yeah,
teacher
and
को, where do you...
the only notion of progression is teaching a higher grade.
Yeah.
Instead of, well, I mean, I'm doing these new things, or I've included research in my teaching, or I've set up like a mentoring program in my class, or whatever. I mean, there's so many things you can do.
Yes.
But we don't think of professional growth in those terms. You're right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all your views. I hope you had a good time.
Thank you.
Yes, it was very
It was
cathartic.
fun.
This was fantastic.
You were very welcome. Thank you.